Center for Climate Protection is an organization founded in 2001 with a mission to reduce greenhouse gas emissions everywhere, and it spearheaded the effort to get Sonoma Clean Power up and running. Sonoma Clean Power is the second community choice aggregation program to launch service in the state of California, launched just this past May of 2014. And I was involved over a 4-year period in helping to spearhead that effort. And you can find out more information about the organization I work for at climateprotection.org. It's also a clean energy advocate sponsor of the conference today. By the way, thank you all for being here for this panel. And I'll introduce the panelists and then ask each of them to state a little bit about their role in the community choice effort program that they're working on. So to my the far left here, my left, Nicole Capritz of the Climate Action Campaign and the San Diego Community Choice effort. To her right, Jess Irvin Ackerman with the Clean Power SF Advocates. That's the San Francisco Community Choice effort. On your far left, Eric Wiem with Slow Clean Energy, or San Luis Obispo Clean Energy. And to my immediate right, Erica Edelson with the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. So maybe starting with Nicole. Nicole, since you came the furthest, she came all the way from San Diego, why don't we start with you just a minute about your role in the San Diego effort.
Okay. I am the executive director of the Climate Action Campaign in San Diego. So we are a new organization that is focused on implementing the city of San Diego's climate plan. I actually had the opportunity when I was working for the mayor's office to write the city's climate plan. And probably our most groundbreaking initiative in the climate plan, which by the way is legally binding, so it sort of ups the ante, is 100% renewable energy by 2035. And our really only strategy we can pursue and implement to get to 100% renewable energy, because we don't have control or jurisdiction over SDG&E, is community choice. So it went through, I was working for the Democratic mayor, and now we have a Republican mayor, and so it was obviously a very tenuous period when he came into office to see if he would maintain our 100% renewable energy goal and community choice as a strategy, and so far he has kept it in the plan. But now obviously the whole game is going to be how we move forward. And the city of San Diego has 40% of the load for SDG&E, so this would be groundbreaking for us as the 8th largest city in the country to have community choice. So it's going to be an interesting, obviously, I don't say battle, but obviously it's going to be a challenge. But that's my role, is to be on the outside and to kind of push and do the education and outreach and hopefully help move the process forward so we do adopt a community choice program.
I'm Jess Irvin Ackerman. I work for the Sierra Club San Francisco Bay chapter, and I'm which is part of the San Francisco Clean Energy Advocates working for a community choice program in San Francisco. San Francisco started working on their community choice energy program in 2004, 11 years ago. It has been an uphill political battle, but we actually are finally seeing an opening this year. The mayor of San Francisco, for the first time in that 11-year period, has come out in support of San Francisco having a clean energy program. Whether that's Clean Power SF or not, we do not know. But we definitely play the role of being the outside agitators from San Francisco's city government and making sure that our elected officials and the agency, which the commissioners of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, which is supposed to be implementing this program, are all appointed by the mayor. So there's no elected accountability there. Has been problematic so far, but we're seeing an opening in 2015.
I'm Erica Edelson with the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And so my role with the Alliance is that I'm the chair of the Berkeley Community Choice Energy Working Group, which is part of the Berkeley Climate Action Coalition, which assists the city of Berkeley in achieving its climate action goals. And the East Bay Clean Power Alliance is really trying to watchdog and ensure very robust community participation in the formation of our community community choice program in Alameda County, which is now kind of in the pre-development phase. Alameda County has 14 cities and a population of about 1.5 million. So once our community choice program comes online, we will be the biggest community choice program by a long shot, unless San Diego beats us to it. I know San Diego might be bigger. Game on, San Diego. But we take our, size matters. We take it seriously. We really want to see the county leveraging that amount of buying power to have as good a program as possible and have it be a model for other programs in the state.
My name is Eric Vium. I'm part of the leadership team for an organization called Slow Clean Energy, and we are a group out of San Luis Obispo County that is committed to the formation of a community choice energy program in our county. Now, for those of you that don't know, San Luis Obispo County is a smaller county than the other communities represented here. We have about 250,000 in the entire county, and we're halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. Although we are the smallest represented on this panel, we are absolutely on the front lines of this conversation around clean energy in a variety of respects. One is we are home to Diablo Canyon, the last remaining nuclear power plant in California. Second, we are home to the Phillips 66 refinery, which is in the process of going through our public planning to decide whether they will add a rail spur, which essentially means that we will be having oil trains coming from Canadian tar sands through Northern California, through the state of California, into San Luis Obispo County for refining. And then third is that we are home to two of the largest solar plants in the world, and that continues to change. But the history of energy and the future of energy is very present in the conversations that we're having in San Luis Obispo. Thank you.
Point here, what we want to offer to folks here in the room is we have these efforts underway of developing community choice programs in California, and so we wanted to be able to share the stories, share what's working, share what some of the challenges are and ways to overcome those challenges. So you've heard a little bit about who we are. I want to find out a little bit with some show of hands who's in the room, and we can maybe, myself and our panelists, get a sense of the folks here. So how many in the room are currently engaged in the state of California and working to get a community choice energy program up and running somewhere? It looks like quite a number. Maybe can we hear what area?
Contra Costa County.
Contra Costa County, back there? Santa Barbara? Alameda, over there? Marin Clean Energy, right? Main Street Moms were there very early on. Great. Good to know. And how about folks that are not currently engaged but are hoping to? You got a gleam in your eye about getting a community choice program. What community?
Well, we're a community bank of the Bay, and we want to be a lender for
Great.
those
Supporting community choice programs. Other areas that are hoping to get a community choice program started?
Working on this in New York State.
New York State. Wow. And did you come out from New York?
Yeah.
Wow. Welcome to our state.
It's not 20 degrees and slushing.
And then folks in the room that are sort of government folks, government level. Okay. Business community representatives. Okay. A few representatives. Advocacy organizations. Okay. Nonprofits. Any groups that I didn't mention? Folks want to shout out, sort of what you're representing? Labor, okay, good. All right, so one of the things, I did see the large show of hands earlier in the day of folks that were, this is your first time coming to the conference, and so I'm imagining there might be folks in the room that aren't familiar with community choice. And so we don't plan to do a sort of ABCs of community choice in the panel today. I will just say really quickly what it is in a very small nutshell, it's a local government agency, public program that buys and sells and has the ability also to build energy for the provision of electricity to residents and businesses. So it's a government, local government-run program, and in the state of California, the vast majority of them focusing on clean energy. A fantastic resource that I will give you right now for where to get the ABCs of community choice are the FAQs of either Sonoma Clean Power or Marin Clean Energy. So you go to those frequently asked questions, and they've got all of the basics in there. It's really great. So let's launch into the questions. The first question I want to ask of all the panelists, the main question, why do this? Why bother? We got that a lot in Sonoma County when we launched Sonoma Clean Power. Why are you doing this? What's broken? Why is it important? What do you want to fix? So the Local Clean Energy Alliance supports community choice energy programs as powerful vehicles for the development of local, democratically controlled, renewable energy resources that meet community needs because they put the community in control of their resources. So the question for all the panelists is, can you comment on the relationship between community choice energy programs and the community-controlled local development of renewable energy and community empowerment and equity and building of a sustainable future for the communities? And why don't we start at the other end this time with Eric?
The question is about why community choice in the first place?
Well, it's why community choice, but why, given that let's start with the assumption that there is the control of an ability to develop local resources, clean energy locally in the hands of the community. How does that help build these, community empowerment, in particular, equity and sustainability on into the future?
Great. Okay. Well, let me start by I think there's really three things in play around that, and I'll be brief. The first and most fundamental is that there's a choice where there currently isn't a choice. And I don't think there's more that needs to be said about that. The second is the choice creates a space for competition and for innovation. And we're already seeing the existing programs in California creating that environment where PG&E is responding with 100% renewable energy local option. So that's the sort of innovation, competition that's driving the race towards a clean energy future. The next thing is that comes, and I want to respond to how you defined community choice of a local government agency that is buying and selling you power. From my perspective, community choice energy program is a business with a locally accountable board of directors. And what the change in that is that it's operating in competition. People have the choice to come and go, and the entity is in competition, so it needs to perform in order to satisfy the needs of its customers. And the piece around the local control is now this entity can be responsive to the priorities of the local community. And in our case, we're here because the priorities around clean energy, but the structure of local control opens up the ability to serve the priorities of those local customers. And that's a double-edged sword we can talk about a little bit later.
And I guess I also see 4 additional virtues of a community choice program that relates to this question of energy democracy. Community choice programs are small. They're locally or regionally based. They're democratically governed and accountable, as Eric spoke to. And I think most importantly, they are not for profit. And then the investor-owned monopoly utilities, by contrast, are huge. They're governed by a board of directors that answers only to private shareholders, not to the community, not to us. And they are for profit. Oh my God, are they for profit? Last year, PG&E's profits were $1.4 billion. The year before, they were $814 million, and even that was a 400% 8-fold increase over the year before. So their profits are totally out of control. And the thing that's important to understand about utility profits is that they are calculated by regulation based on the transmission of electricity that's generated from a central power plant and transmitted over long distances. So just by the nature of how their profits are calculated, they have absolutely no interest in distributed generation. They make no money when I have solar on my roof and when there's lots of distributed solar around the community. Their whole business model is inimical to that. And so that's basically the model that we have been stuck with for over 100 years now, where these utilities are able to extract enormous profits and dump all of the negative impacts on the community, on the planet. I don't have to go into what those negative impacts are. I'm sure everyone in this room is all too familiar. But what I want to point out is that I think that this ability to privatize the profits and socialize the costs really points to a very disturbing fact, which is that we are now not living in a democracy. We are living under an energy oligarchy. And that's just becomes more clear by the year. And this is really what the lawmakers were worried about when they passed the antitrust laws back in the day. So I dug up kind of a powerful quote that I'm going to share and see if you'll never guess who said this. I'll tell you that. Private monopolies are indefensible and intolerable. They are the most efficient means yet devised for appropriating the fruits of industry to the benefit of the few at the expense of the many. And unless their insatiate greed is checked, all wealth will be aggregated in a few hands and the republic destroyed. So that was the Democratic Party platform of 1900. I don't expect to see that in 2016. And one just short, more recent quote, and this is from the U.S. Supreme Court in an antitrust case. From this country's beginning, there has been an abiding and widespread fear of the evils which flow from monopoly. That is, the concentration of economic power in the hands of a few. So, okay, we're living under energy oligarchy. How is community choice going to liberate us from that? Well, you know, it's really like what Cecilia, the woman from Minnesota, said this morning. It is a first step toward restoring the energy commons. It's taking the power away, literally the power, political power and electricity juice, away from the monopoly utilities and putting it in the hands of the people where it should have been all along. And then it will really be up to us to make of that what we will. And it's a long game, making sure that these programs deliver the benefits that we want them to. But it will be our destiny, not the oligarchs.
Why community choice? So number one for the Sierra Club, the organization I work for, obviously is global climate disruption, and this is the fastest way for us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and the most effective tool for local governments to use to take action on climate. Electricity is a huge portion of the carbon pollution that we emit and a driver to climate change. And then the second piece is that this is actually a vehicle for us to redistribute wealth in our society. So the Bay Area is incredibly diverse. San Francisco used to be incredibly diverse. It is unfortunately becoming less so because of the extreme income inequality and displacement that's going on. So using San Francisco as an example, you know, this is an opportunity for us to redistribute wealth and economic development and jobs to the most underserved communities in San Francisco. We can direct the local distributed generation to be built in those communities, create local hire and jobs programs to train people that live in those communities to actually give the resources and the benefits of these programs to the most traditionally underserved to lift them up and allow them to stay in San Francisco and have jobs and be able to have their homes there. So I think it's about community resilience and really creating these, community choice is all about the benefit to the community. And when I said earlier about everyone being an energy expert, if you are an energy user or an electricity user, you are an expert expert in what service needs to be provided for you to survive. You know, this is about decommodifying energy and creating it as a service and as a commons, like we were talking about this morning. As something that should be accessible to all. And the benefits of that kind of program should be accessible to all, not fueling the increased income equality in California and in the Bay Area.
Obviously, I come from a conservative city, right? We have a Republican mayor. I think we're the only large city in America with a Republican mayor. And, you know, we haven't really had a long-term mayor who's been a Democrat in my whole time in San Diego. So the framing of community choice has to be different for us. I mean, I love all this lofty, noble language about democratizing energy and what we can do with it and community economic development, all the things that have already been said. I personally believe in all that. My history is working for an environmental justice nonprofit organization, so I'm down with that. But I do presentations day and night about our city's climate plan and community choice, and that is not the messaging I use. I'll just be honest. I talk about the free market. I talk about competition and I talk about choice, and that's what gets support for the community choice model. So obviously, we all know you have to cater to your audience, but that is, if you're probably going to ask any of the elected officials in San Diego, kind of how they view community choice, that is the frame that sells them on it. So yeah, I think, fortunately, SDG&E's rates have gone through the roof. I mean, like over the top. The city's budget for energy just went up by $12 million, and people are freaking out. The school districts, all the school districts in San Diego County, we have like 4 million people in San Diego County, united and did a huge press event about how the energy rates are crushing their budgets and, providing a barrier to hiring new teachers, doing school supplies, all that good stuff. No one ever talks about energy, really. So this is like unprecedented. The business community listed high energy rates as one of the 4, quote, horsemen that's keeping them back from deciding whether to stay in San Diego or even come to San Diego. So it's a high profile conversation right now, but again, it's about economics. And so the biggest selling point for us and for my organization and how we're framing it, even though, I'm a full-on liberal progressive person, is about how this is a way to provide lower rates. And obviously, we focus on the renewable content too, but it's an economic issue, and that's for us how we're framing it.
And I think maybe you rattled off the items that might resonate for conservatives. There's also local control. I think it does as well. I didn't hear that one in the ones you mentioned. How about, I do see a hand being raised, so why don't we have a question from the audience?
My concern is that we won't have enough local businesses that are ready to, participate and create those jobs. And so, like one of the speakers from the first panel said, then a good majority of energy is going to come in from outside areas, and jobs are going to be created outside the area that's managed to get over the hub. So, could you all, in the spirit of examples of what has worked, or these businesses that are going to participate in this economy need to be ready to go. What are some examples of how can we all support?
That's actually a perfect question, because it relates directly to my question too, which is, so we actually kind of started with this assumption that community choice programs can develop local resources, right? The second question, maybe it should have come first, how can community choice programs be a vehicle for community-based renewable energy development, and I should say energy efficiency implementation as well? So to your question, the way you framed it, and the way I just framed it, and now I'm not going to go just down the line anymore. I just want to see panelists that want to spring up and maybe respond to that. Eric, I see you.
There's a lot in this piece of the conversation, and there's an ongoing discourse back and forth about what the appropriate approach should be in terms of the development of a community choice energy program. The thing that I will say that is uniform across the entire conversation is that the mission of the organization needs to be very clear on what is intended to be accomplished, and that then sets the tone for what will come. That will inform the policies that will follow. The next thing is there's a choice about, do we want to get the program up and running, or do we want to set ourselves up for a significant local deployment of renewables? I'm of the mind that what's best is to get the program up and running, to get cash flowing, and to then use that resource to do significant real planning and implementation of programs. And so there are providers that are enabling programs to quick start, to get off the ground. And then there are additional providers like Local Power, like Sam Golding's group, who have very innovative tools and methods for implementing very ambitious distributed local local portfolios of renewable energy and energy efficiency. So that would be my recommendation in terms of the path that these communities should take. And let me step back for a moment. And the reason for that is that in San Luis Obispo County, we have elected officials that for the most part have no idea what it takes to run a local energy agency. And so there's a learning curve for the electeds and for the community. And so being able to lift an organization that is immediately producing benefits to the community creates a space of possibility instead of doing long-term planning and saying you need to be able to deliver this out of the gate. That sets the electeds up for risky headlines that reduces political will.
Well, I think it's very appropriate that the woman from the bank asked this question, because really the biggest hurdle that programs have to get through is not so much the availability of solar and wind developers. I mean, especially in California, there are plenty of companies that are, out there eager for this business and ready to roll. But the programs don't have the financing starting from day one. And the reason for that, I'm sure you would know being from a bank, is because it takes a while. Once the program forms, it's on something called a Joint Powers Authority, which is a new entity, a new government entity with no credit history and no credit rating. And it takes probably a minimum of 5 years to really get a solid credit rating sufficient that at least a normal bank, maybe community bank has more mission driven and would overlook the lack of a credit history. But most banks and most bonding authorities are not going to put up any serious money to a very new community choice program that doesn't have that credit rating yet. So that's one of the big hurdles. And I think, that's something that for those of us who get involved in community choice, I know for myself, I came in and it was like, yes, we're going to get a program going, and then I'm going to wake up the next morning living in a solar ecotopia and woo! And then over time you realize, okay, this is a long game. And I am tending now to agree, I think, more with the view Eric put forward, which is it is really important just to get the program running, get it existing, get it starting to bring in revenue from customers and build up its credit rating. And then that will, bring on the capital all the sooner.
I want to look at the big picture. So community choice energy is not the goal. Community choice energy is the vehicle to get us to the goal, which is distributed generation, a safe, healthy, and just future that's not destroyed by climate change. That actually, where we have resilient communities that are equitable and just. So we're not doing community choice just to do community choice. And there are other places in the United States, like in Illinois, where they don't have a utility monopoly, and communities do community choice energy just so they can switch to a different utility provider that's cheaper and it's not cleaner. And it doesn't do anything about equity or justice in their communities, and it doesn't address climate change. So in California, we're doing these differently, and they are really the vehicle to get us to the future we want to see, not the end-all be-all solution, just through getting these programs up and running. So for us, it's important to think about the challenges that Eric and Erica put forward. But it's also, what is the goal of these programs? So we, in all the community stakeholder programs that we've participated in, or alliances that we've put together around these programs. We've put together goals of what we want the program to achieve, and a huge part of that is prioritizing local development of renewable resources for all the reasons that we've said before. But that's actually been an interesting, sticking point and places where we disagree of how much, how fast. But in San Francisco, we have the San Francisco Department of Environment has existing energy efficiency and solar programs where they actually are incentivizing local residents to do that, and they already are creating jobs through those programs. So this is kind of building on that. We already have some of those relationships. We have in San Francisco, we have community groups like the Chinese Progressive Alliance who've partnered with labor unions to create pathways to jobs for people that actually live in San Francisco. So we have the infrastructure for this, albeit much smaller than we're going to see through these community choice energy programs, and much smaller than we need to actually create this change. But we do have the basis for what we're doing.
I was going to actually ask you a question, because in Sonoma County, so the question is about the businesses, and there's energy sector businesses clearly that have a stake and are involved, but really any business that owns real property, has a sunny rooftop, has maybe, Sonoma County is an agricultural county, so agricultural wine sector, and so in any given community, there might be some energy resources. How do you develop them? And Nicole, I know that in San Diego, there's a very strong, business stakeholder community, so maybe you could speak a little bit to how, the engagement of the businesses there, both in the energy sector side and also just any business that might have an opportunity. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, there's kind of two sides to that. One, obviously, as I mentioned, the business community is kind of unified in saying that SDG&E is not providing the service they want, right? The rates are too high, and they're not really getting options or different program opportunities, and that's something they articulate quite often. So they're seeking choices. They definitely want to engage in a different way with how they are supplied with energy. And it's funny that the business community that approached me, the sector, was we have some storage facilities, some internet storage. I guess they have these big, massive batteries or whatever. I don't know exactly. I haven't visited yet. But, the energy bills are just like through the roof. And so they're literally thinking about leaving. And then so now the mayor's getting nervous because they're a big economic driver. So there's that from that facet. Then, yes, we have a very thriving clean tech community. I was just thinking in response to whether the business community is prepared to provide any of the energy. And obviously, San Diego has like one of the top 5 clean tech industries. It's very well organized, very politically connected, and very active. And so they're certainly engaged. But, of course, our clean tech sector is also highly funded by SDG&E, which is something, of course, they, in a very sophisticated strategy, did early on, because they knew that in order to sort of contain the clean tech sector, it was best to fund them. So it's kind of there's tension there, and it does prevent them, unfortunately, from kind of engaging more in the conversation more publicly. But behind the scenes, there's certainly more opportunities. And so it's really, from my organization's standpoint, in terms of strategy and moving forward, one of my goals is to create a broad-based, diverse coalition that includes the business community that wouldn't, on its own naturally be involved in a climate change campaign per se. But since we have this kind of nexus between what we want to achieve, that I think there's an opportunity there. But it's going to take work. It's probably, as everybody knows up here, as PG&E is so integrated into all facets of your community, they are in San Diego as well. On all levels, political, nonprofit, business, industrial, they're everywhere all the time. We can't compete with that. But so I think it's critical for us, though, to have these kind of surgical, strategic coalitions that we're going to build with the business community.
But the question sort of flowing from the conversation we've been having about stakeholders and how to engage them over the long haul, it's not an easy thing to do. So folks want to touch on that? Eric, you look ready to go.
And the comments that I have, or the initial comments, really, you told me, Woody, about what were the lessons learned from Sonoma, and those were really around not overpromising. So in starting the program, really set realistic expectations with the stakeholders, because you're building relationships over the long term, and you don't want them to put themselves too far out. So really honoring the people you're building relationships with. And then also honoring the capacity of the the community that you're working in. For our county in particular, there are 58 counties in California, and many of those are small, rural counties that this is a very new conversation. So looking into what's the capacity of the people that you're talking to, what are the capacity of the staffs at the cities and the county that you're working with, what resources are available, or what resources can you bring to bear for them, and what's their level of experience and understanding. The other piece is going back to this idea of this program launch strategy and then the program operational strategy. Do the communities build in-house resources, or do the communities contract for outside resources? And then at what point is there a strategic decision to change that, moving an outside responsibility into an internal staff person within the agency? I'm of the mind that contracting out solves a lot of problems and makes a lot of things possible. And when we're dealing with a variety of smaller counties, it also creates a certain level of scale where we can bring efficiency to the programs that are being deployed in those communities. So we're not developing one-off energy efficiency programs that are going to struggle. If you look at the existing public utilities, they have energy efficiency programs, oftentimes very ineffective energy efficiency programs. So how can we bring private contract innovation to community choice programs to help to more rapidly transition?
Working on a community choice program for 11 years in a city and county, so the power structure is very compounded and very small, and often a lot of power lies with one specific position in the city. It's definitely a long haul, and we've had some challenges. As you know, San Francisco is the heart of PG&E's service territory, and they are unwilling to let it go. So we've faced a serious uphill battle. I've only worked on this for the last 2.5 years, but that still seemed like a long time. I can't imagine, there are some of our advocates who've been with it since the beginning. And we've had some struggles. We've lost people along the way because it's just gotten really hard. And sometimes we work on it for a year and we think we're getting somewhere, and then it's like, oh, no, that vote got stalled, and now we're not going to, then we kind of take a break for a year, and then we're like, oh, wait, we can do it now. So we're in one of those, oh, there's an opportunity right now, we're going to take it right now. And we're again going out into the community and trying to bring in the folks who, are going to be served by this program and who really need to be part of the decision making about this program, to be part of our coalition. But, it's, we weren't always talking about this as an equity and justice program. We were talking about this as a climate program, a climate action program, and that doesn't get the same people to the table as if you talk about it as an economic benefits and jobs program that will bring, will bring money into your communities and bring jobs to your residents. So we've definitely struggled there a lot. And our core group is about 6 people. I'm the only woman that participates in those meetings, and I'm also younger than everybody by a significant amount. And it's definitely a challenge to bring new people into this conversation that's been going on for 11 years. And figuring out, do they need to know every detail that's happened the whole way, or can you just say, hey, I have the same vision for you as the future. I want to help. Let's get to work. So that's what we're doing right now, is just saying, hey, you don't need to know what happened in the past unless you want to know. We're happy to tell you, but let's get together and work for this common vision. But this is a very complicated issue as well. It's not a 2-minute elevator speech. There really is a lot of complexity to community choice, especially the way we're doing it in California. And every community has different things they want to see out of these programs, and that's something that we're trying to tease out of people. And that's a way that we're trying to get folks involved who wouldn't traditionally be part of this advocacy. Is saying, we want you to decide. We want you to be part of the decision making about what this program brings to the community.
I would just echo, again, because I've been in politics for 15 years in San Diego, if I don't have the business community, and I mean big business, like power players in the city, I will not community choice will not get passed. And so that's for me why I'm building strategic relationships with some of the power figures in San Diego, which takes time. It takes time, and that's okay. But I've been around for, like I said, for a while, and I worked in the mayor's office. So, I have the ability to have those conversations, but to get them to actually commit and go public, of course, is a whole other angle when they go golfing with the executive of SDG&E on a regular basis. So, I mean, that's what I'm confronting, but at the same time, it's pivotal. So I would say, for me, and what I would recommend to other folks in bigger cities is how essential it is to kind of broaden the base to key power figures, key political power figures. Also for us, the unions are very important. And so I don't know how much we want to get into that conversation, but we are not going to be able to pass community choice without IBEW supporting it. Period. So it's a question of those two sectors in the 8th largest city in the country are both politically powerful and essential to making community choice pass and frankly be implemented successfully. Because as we've seen, obviously, even after community choice programs have started, these same sectors have come, moved in and raise concerns, and that creates instability, and then AB 2145. And so there's a need, in my opinion, to do as much as we can at the forefront, like you're mentioning you're doing in San Francisco, to get all the stakeholders at the table.
In general, a strategy for engaging the stakeholders is articulating in the program that's knowing your audience, articulating the program in a way that's going to resonate and being truthful. I mean, you can't just make stuff up, right? And then early buy-in. And I'm glad you mentioned the IBEW. I will step outside of my moderator role and say that in Sonoma County, we did engage the IBEW 551 up there early on, and actually got them on the steering committee, and they were part of the dialogue. And it was not easy because they've got other, components or dimensions of their union that are pulling in different other direction, unfortunately. And so we can talk about that. Did you want to comment on that at all, Jess? I know that you've had...
Sure.
Yeah.
VW is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and there is a very large local of that, which represents all the electricians who work for the monopoly utilities, or PG&E specifically. That's IBEW 1245. Their business manager has been very outspoken opposing community choice energy programs, and actually created an anti-community choice campaign in San Francisco called Stop the Shell Shock. And that was because San Francisco's second iteration of this program was going to have a contract with Shell to purchase their clean energy through Shell North America. And they actually, mounted a pretty serious campaign saying, well, what are we doing with this clean energy program if we're buying electricity from Shell? It's actually just, it's a sheep in wolf in sheep's clothing. It's actually partnering with the big bad oil company trying to create a local clean energy program. So now we have a new version of Clean Power SF, which no longer contracts with Shell. And part of the reason we were doing that is because when we went out to bids for energy, that was the only provider that could give us what we wanted for San Francisco, that could give us enough energy to serve the first phase that we were looking for in San Francisco. So, they were very successful in mounting that opposition. And that's part of why we've been so delayed and hit another point in 2013 where we weren't going to move forward. So, and IBEW 1245 has basically been, they say that the reason that they're working on this is because they don't want to lose jobs for their workers. But the thing about community choice energy is that it actually still uses the infrastructure of the monopoly utilities to transmit the electricity. What do electricians do for the utilities? They manage the lines, the transmission lines that the community choice energy programs will still be using. So there won't be any jobs lost for electricians when we create these community choice energy programs. Instead, they're basically being a mouthpiece for for PG&E, unfortunately. And there are some IBEW locals, like in San Diego and, like in Sonoma, who really want to be part of community clean energy programs. Unfortunately, 1245 has been so outspoken that they've basically pulled the entire union up to oppose in California, away from these programs and away from being able to be a real stakeholder in these processes. In addition, they've taken many resolutions to local labor councils and building trade councils to look like they're supporting community choice energy programs, but actually creating the resolutions create conditions which are impossible for community choice energy programs to actually agree to before they're launched. So it overall on the surface, it looks like, oh, we're just creating a labor-friendly community choice program, and that's what we're asking for. But some of the things they're asking for are impossible to do before these programs. A way that we've kind of started to address this is by going to other unions who are part of labor councils or the Building Trades Council. The laborers who are a sponsor of this are here today, Local 261, and we've been, talking with them in San Francisco, and, they're working right now to see if the building trades can come out in support of a real community choice program in San Francisco. And, we're working with the other service unions, the nurses, the transportation workers. There are tons of other unions that are supportive of what we're trying to do. And it's just getting them to feel comfortable to lead this. So this afternoon, there actually is a Working with Labor panel, which I urge you to go to if you're interested in this.
I do have a couple more questions. One that's about managing sort of competing interests, and one that's, I'm sorry, you had a question, so go ahead, sir.
Well, it's also trying to get more into this jobs creation and union issue. We're trying to sell this as a job creating. But if we're talking about rooftop solar, you go to all the solar companies, they're subcontracting their installations to non-union labor, which is why you don't get unions on top of this. So we're really talking about, if we're talking seriously about union scale job creation, and that also involves less refinery people who go out to the refineries and tell them where their jobs going to go if you want to shut the refineries down. We have to be talking about larger scale projects than individual home rooftop solar. And that's sort of the discussion. How do we approach that strategically? What kind of projects are we really talking about that are going to generate the kind of jobs that are going to replace PG&E jobs or Shell Oil refinery worker jobs?
It's a good question, good comment, Nicole.
I would just add to what you were saying about IBEW, in that it's not just the line worker jobs they're fighting for. Right now, they have a very effective relationship with the utility. So when utility goes out and buys power for larger scale development, for solar wind, they do oftentimes use IBEW workers. So this is different than the line workers. And so they're concerned that if suddenly that's no longer who they're going to work for, that this community choice program then won't hire them to also develop these larger scale projects. So I think that's, to me, a larger tension than even with the SDG&E line workers, is the existing IBEW that does the solar installations in the Imperial Valley for San Diego. So that's, I think we have to figure out how to navigate that. But that, to me, if we could do that, in my opinion, then IBEW would be more interested in community choice.
Please, this is such a pivotal issue, and is Germany, which is on a rapid transition to renewable energy through their feed-in tariff, in studies that they have done, are showing that they're going to need to expand their distribution grids, like double and triple the size of the amount of infrastructure that's already in place. So in the work that we do in transitioning to a renewable energy future, the work is done in the distribution grids. So rooftop solar may not be the opportunity for IBEW labor, but the redesign and the rebuilding of our distribution grids is a huge opportunity for them. That's where the jobs are going.
So there's two aspects of this. One is that what you're doing is you're taking the whole electricity system and you're putting it into public hands. And when you have, a public agency organizing work, they can set all kinds of standards around that work. When the highway systems are rebuilt, they're built in a way that's dictated by the federal government through the Bacon and Davis, whatever it's called. You can set labor standards, you can set all kinds of things. That's number one, and it's very important that this sector is not going to get organized unless it has help from public agencies like a community choice agency that can come in and say, work is going to be done, it has to be done according to these standards, with this kind of labor, this kind of prevailing wage, and it can knock out that competitive edge that non-union labor has. That's number one. But even more importantly is that it's called community choice aggregation. They aggregate customers, but it can also aggregate work. So if you have 1,000 buildings that need an energy upgrade or 1,000 buildings that need rooftop solar, they don't have to be done as 1,000 individual projects. Now you have a public agency that says this is one project. This is a 1,000 building project that can now be negotiated as a labor project. And that's a very, very powerful thing that you can only achieve through an organizing agency that's trying to do that. I've actually talked to the IBW folks about this and said, what are you doing? You're walking away from a whole sector of work that is going to be developed whether you like it or not, and your only opportunity to organize this is by doing it through a public agency that can do this. And somebody else pointed out, Jessica pointed out, that it's the way of other parts of the union. But community choice is the way to organize this sector and to make it a union sector.
Well said. Thanks so much for chiming in, Al. I want to shift now, because of time, to the final question, which has to do with resources that our panelists have found that are helpful as you are looking for support for your community choice program. I should let folks know, a little commercial for my own organization, Center for Climate Protection. Part of the reason that we took on community choice and helped establish Sonoma Clean Power, led the charge for that, was to be able to, establish that model and sort of take it on the road. And so we're now working statewide, Center for Climate Protection, to support communities around the state. There's a new coalition that emerged out of the fight last year against AB 2145 called Californians for Energy Choice. It is a coalition dedicated to defending and supporting community choice programs. There's entities like Sam Golding's Community Choice Partners that's working to support community choice programs. So there's a raft. Lean Energy US has been around for a long time. So there are support groups out there. You should familiarize yourself with those. Hopefully we have some of those links on the event web page. But so I wanted to ask this, what might be the final question given time, about resources you found that are helpful. And let's think about Larry's question about startup financing. I guess I'll kick it off by saying, in our effort in Sonoma County, Sonoma Clean Power, fortunately we had an agency that stepped up. The Sonoma County Water Agency was a water agency that actually has some energy generation in its portfolio and has an energy policy mandate, carbon-free water by 2015. They've accomplished that, according to them. And so, yeah, anyway, so you can verify that with them and how they've done that. But anyway, so I want to give it to the panelists now. Resources that you found helpful, that you would advise others that are working on community choice programs.
In Alameda, what's become really essential is that we formed this East Bay Clean Power Alliance, because before we got together, it was just kind of all of us with our cloistered efforts in each of our cities around the county. And so now that, the county's actually moving forward, it became clear that we needed to come together in a coordinated way and really become a unified force to be reckoned with, and we did become that very quickly. So I really encourage anyone out there working on a community choice campaign to look around at the other players in your county or in your region and come together. On this financing issue, we've actually, the East Bay Clean Power Alliance has had a little project that's ongoing where we're trying to research the financing options that are out there. And as I alluded to before, it is very limited in the early stages. There's a lot of kind of small change available in the form of, getting customers to access PACE and PPAs. Don't really have time to get into what all those things are. But the big money is really the bank loans and the revenue bonds, and it's hard to be able to float those until you have a credit rating. But we're working on that.
We actually are able to do this work because we have funding from the San Francisco Foundation, which is a community foundation that funds work that's good for the community. So, because we have this big vision for what community choice can do, and we're able to, really articulate what do we want to do with this program? Is it just for climate action, or is it building community power? So that was a great resource for us to be able to get funding, to have staff time to work for it. Also with this new opportunity, we're recognizing that we really need to be able to give resources to existing community-based groups who know the community and already work in the community. So it's not necessarily the job of an outsider to go into a new community and say, hey, I'm going to tell you about this really cool thing that you're going to be automatically opted into. That's a little scary. So realizing that you might always not be the messenger for this, to go into a new community is also really important. And then we've created actually our own website in the Bay Area. I work actually in community choice in 3 different places, not just in San Francisco. But we have created a new website for lay people who don't know what this is, called Bay Area Energy Choice, which really simply lays out why you should be doing this and why we want to be moving towards community choice.
I would encourage you to reach out to the service providers. They are working in the industry and can provide insight into how things work. I've been well educated. In particular, I've worked with Noble Energy, who's the data manager for Sonoma Clean Power in Marin and Lancaster. The other is working with exploring communities. I work heavily with Santa Barbara County. We're supporting each other in the politics, and we're supporting each other in understanding how we can make this work as similar communities. And then also looking to the existing programs. Sonoma Clean Power, the staff in Marin have been phenomenal in supporting us, and they've got a ton of work on their hands already, so we really appreciate that. What I want to speak about financing is this. Sonoma started delivering power in May of last year. They had about $3 million in debt. 3 months later, they paid off that debt, and they've been putting $1 million in cash reserves away since. So in the process of this last year, they built about $10 million in cash reserves. That was with the first 22,000 customers. Now they're at like 140,000 customers. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the quarterly statement from the first quarterly statement from 2015. The reason I bring that up is because the economics of these programs are so attractive that bringing startup financing to bear is getting a lot simpler, because you can bring this cash flow to a financing agency and say, look, this is what's possible, so there's a real opportunity in that. And then the second thing is that there's a company, California Clean Power, that's offering quick start services, which essentially they say no money out of pocket for your community. We'll earn it back on the back end from the cash flow once the projects are operating. And so there's a huge opportunity there. I'm really excited about that model for our community.
Great. In terms of resources, I just wanted to go back to what I said this morning and at the beginning of the panel. There are people that are so-called energy experts and who have really done a lot of research on this, and can think of different models that we should launch with. But the people that we really should be resourcing for this and figuring out like how we're going to do this in our communities is actually the people in our communities. So those are a huge resource to talk to your neighbors and talk to people that actually may not have thought about themselves as energy experts and say, what do you want out of this program? It's your community. It's your community choice.